Hi everyone, I'm doing this video today because someone asked me to discuss why I think the US dollar is a Ponzi scheme. And it's interesting because you know what, people used to call Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme, and that really isn't. And you'd say, well, wait a second, you know what, if I have a US dollar in my hand, how could that be a Ponzi scam? You know what, there's some truth to that, right? If you own a dollar, some truth to that, right? If you own a dollar, right, it's not promised you any income, right? Just like a Bitcoin is. So how could this be a Ponzi scam? Well, let's start off by determining where does this come from first. If you don't know, right, by now, all money, whether you're in the United States or Canada or Chile or wherever, it doesn't really matter, gets created out of debt. So if you go to the bank, you borrow money, the bank doesn't take the money from somebody else and give it to you. No. They create it out of nothing based on you signing on the dotted line, and the money gets created right then and there. And so they only create the principal, but not the interest. And you have to hold them back interest on that money. Now, if you want to know more about how that works, there's a video in the link below. Now, this requires that there must be more and more borrowers to generate more and more money into the system, because because only the principal is created and not the interest. And so in order for all that money to be paid back, there always has to be more debt to create more money in the system, and that is not viable because you always need somebody else to borrow more money. Just like in a Ponzi scam, in order for it to continue to operate, you need to get new customers to pay off old customers. So when you give your money to the bank, and that's what you're doing, you're loaning the money to the bank, they not only get to spend it any way they want, but they use it to help as a reserve to create more money out of nothing. Now, they have found tricks away. They've changed the laws, of course, so that they don't need to have that as a reserve. So technically, it's like back in the 60s, where you know how there was a tax of the rich for 90%, but nobody really paid it, right? Because there's loopholes. Well, just like in the bank, there's a reserve requirement, but nobody really follows it because there's loopholes around it. So they don't really need to follow any of those reserve requirements, and thus they can create more and more money out of debt beyond the stated reserve requirements that most videos tell you about when you learn about how money is created out of nothing. So basically, because they need more and more people going into debt, and if they run out of people of going into debt, then the whole system comes crashing down. Now, of course, they're always going to have the government to come in and say, hey, you know what, I'll borrow more money, borrow more money. So and effectively, right, if the government keeps coming in to borrow more money, or if someone comes in and keeps borrowing more money beyond the capacity to pay, then this becomes worthless and effectively wiping you out of all your savings that you've put into this, whether you stored it in the bank or you kept it in dollars. So get out of this Ponzi scheme, buy some gold, buy some silver, or maybe even some cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and so forth. Thanks for watching.